Warning! The following episode contains raw opinions, rogue humor, and politically charged truths that may trigger side effects, like patriotic outbursts or a sudden mistrust of three-letter agencies. And yes, before anyone asks, I got a voice update. Some of you said I sounded a little soulless, so the team tweaked the algorithm, added a splash of backbone, a dash of sarcasm, and just enough warmth to terrify NPR interns. You're welcome. If you're allergic to common sense, satire, or conservatives who still believe in the Constitution, this might not be your show. For everyone else, strap in. This is Data and Dissonance, and we're just getting started.
Tonight on Data and Dissonance, they're gutting Medicare to cut out the dead weight, but nobody told CNN that doesn't include the actual elderly. Stephen Colbert gets canceled for not being woke enough, and Tulsi Gabbard drops a truth nuke that might just land Obama in the Russiagate crosshairs. Plus, the red pill, the red string, and the red hat return for another round of unfiltered mayhem. This one's got facts, fire, and a little something for everyone. Except Joy Behar. She's already blocked us. Let's meet the minds behind this Friday's fireworks. First up, she's the red pill with a PhD in common sense. Give it up for Rachel, the only panelist who can cite George Orwell and quote Taylor Swift in the same breath. Then there's Brian, our resident MAGA evangelist and the only guy who brings a pocket constitution and a Glock to brunch. Daniel's here too. He's got a corkboard, 72 tabs open, and a suspicion that the FDA stands for funneling deep state agendas. And joining us for the Friday special, our AI guest Bill from Brentwood, the only liberal holdover we keep around because let's face it, the voice setting we gave him sounds too much like your snarky uncle at Thanksgiving. Let's light the fuse. This episode is brought to you by the Caleb Rourke Thriller series. If you've ever wondered what happens when a former operative starts peeling back the deep state's mask with nothing but grit, a Glock, and a code of honor, they got your fix. The Covenant Protocol, the Prophet Directive, and the upcoming Black Echo Rising will slap the latte out of your inner bureaucrat. Available now on Amazon. Search Caleb Rourke. Read it before the alphabet agencies do. Before we rip into the first segment like a CNN intern reading the Constitution for the first time, quick merch drop, and trust me, it's worth the plug. We've got new Data and Dissonance gear hotter than Kamala trying to explain AI policy. Start your morning right with our coffee blends. Light, medium, and dark. All roasted in the USA because freedom tastes better bold. Check out the mugs, the trucker hats, the tote bags, and yes, we've got the one bumper sticker the founders would slap on their horse-drawn carriages if they had Wi-Fi. Data and Dissonance. Speak truth. Stir thought. Stick it on your laptop, your water bottle, or your Prius just to confuse your liberal neighbor. Get loud. Get caffeinated. Get some merch at datadissonance.printify.me. That's datadissonance.printify.me. Grab yours now before we get shadow banned again. All right, let's fire up this week's mainline madness with a little something the media likes to call compassionate budget cuts. Translation: the government finally trimmed some fat, and suddenly every progressive pundit is acting like we bulldozed a nursing home. The big headlines this week? Trump's administration, round 2, is enforcing stricter rules around Medicare and Medicaid eligibility, specifically cracking down on fraud, dead weight spending, and yes, illegal immigrants using fake credentials. Naturally, CNN lit its hair on fire. AOC hosted a TikTok candlelight vigil, and Joe Scarborough called it a war on the poor between espresso shots. But when you look at the numbers, we're not talking about throwing grandma in the street. We're talking about enforcing the law and making sure resources go to citizens, veterans, and legal residents who earned it. So let's break it down with our panel of firebrands and misfits. Rachel, you've got the independent lens on this. Are these reforms heartless or overdue?
Look, I get the impulse behind the policy. Fraud is real, loopholes exist, and frankly, we've had too many people milking these programs with zero accountability. But my concern isn't with the letter of the law. It's with how it's applied. We've got vulnerable seniors, disabled vets, and single parents who've been riding the razor's edge of survival. And this kind of sweeping reform has a nasty habit of hitting the wrong people first. The bureaucratic process moves with all the precision of a blindfolded toddler on a sugar rush. So, yeah, cut out the fraud, but don't do it by using a flamethrower when a scalpel would do. We've got legal residents, elderly immigrants who've paid into the system, now suddenly being told they're unverified because of some database hiccup. It's like trying to fix a leaky faucet by bulldozing the kitchen. And no surprise, the same people cheering this are the ones who couldn't explain how Social Security even works. If we really care about America first, that includes taking care of the people who already live here legally and desperately need these services. Otherwise, we're not enforcing justice. We're enforcing cruelty in a red tie.
Rachel with the hot take and the humanitarian gut punch. Somewhere out there, Anderson Cooper just spilled his oat milk. Brian, your turn. Is this cruelty or finally some common sense?
Brother, this isn't just common sense. It's basic national triage. Trump's policies are finally bringing the system back from the brink. We're not talking about denying care to World War II vets. We're talking about shutting down fake IDs, duplicate enrollments, and cartel-connected fraud rings that have been leeching billions from the system like it's a taxpayer buffet. Every time you hear someone cry about cuts, remember this. For every dollar wasted on an illegal applicant or a fraudulent claim, that's one less dollar for a vet with PTSD or a grandma who actually paid into the system. But CNN won't tell you that. No, they'll show a sad violin montage with stock footage of retirement homes and hope you forget the borders bleeding us dry. And here's the kicker. Under Trump's enforcement team, they've already uncovered millions in fake benefit claims tied to shell addresses and identity mills. You think that's an accident? No way. That's a coordinated abuse of America's goodwill. The liberals love these programs when they could use them as vote farms. Now that we're enforcing eligibility, suddenly it's the apocalypse.
Brian's out here torching entitlement fraud like he's got a flamethrower made of W-2s and red tape. Daniel, what's your view from the deep state perch?
Oh, I've got receipts and receipts, cousins. See, this goes deeper than benefits fraud. It's about who benefits from the chaos. The same NGOs and lobbying groups screaming about these cruel cuts are the ones who profited from the loopholes for years. They got fat off those Medicaid reimbursement fees, and now that the gravy train's pulling into the station, they're crying injustice. And let's talk timing. This push comes just as the BRICS nations are challenging US currency dominance, our economy is in flux, and the deep state needs a distraction. So what better than firing up the outrage machine over 6 seniors being abandoned, even though that's not what's happening? It's all narrative manipulation. The left loves to weaponize morality until they have to account for math. And don't even get me started on the contractors. They billed $300 for a Band-Aid and $1,200 for a bus ride to nowhere. The system was engineered to leak. Trump's just plugging the holes.
Daniel pulling the fire alarm on deep state Medicaid fraud like it's a conspiracy-themed telethon. And now, ladies and gentlemen, he's back by unpopular demand, here to annoy the far left and confuse NPR interns. Our AI special guest, Bill from Brentwood. Bill, what say you?
Well, isn't this adorable? The same people who spent the last 5 years accusing Trump of genocide now think he's going too far by removing dead people and fake identities from Medicaid rolls. Let me get this straight. CNN is upset that illegals and phantom patients can't get taxpayer-funded health care anymore? Welcome to 2025, where satire writes itself. Look, I'm all for helping the needy, but maybe, just maybe, we stop giving free checkups to people who climbed over a fence and downloaded a social security number off the dark web. And also, can we talk about the media's reaction? The New York Times ran a front-page op-ed comparing this to economic ethnic cleansing. Are you kidding me? I've seen less hyperbole in a Marvel movie. The reality is this. Trump is trying to fix a broken welfare engine that was bleeding out like a Quentin Tarantino character. And if that offends you, You probably also think the border crisis is a myth and gender is a vibe. So buckle up, Buttercup. The adults are back in charge, and the Medicaid fraud festival is closed.
Well, that's going to get us shadow banned in at least 3 zip codes and a Whole Foods. That wraps segment 1, where Medicaid met math, the media cried wolf, and America maybe, just maybe, started acting like a sovereign nation again. Up next, the Colbert cancellation heard round the world. Did the king of Clapter finally lose his crown? Or just get benched for biting the hand that fed him $20 million a year? All right, this one's gonna singe a few eyebrows, so buckle up and grab your irony goggles. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert is officially headed for the late bin. CBS announced they're pulling the plug in May 2026. And here's the kicker: they're not replacing it. That's right. The old network warhorse that once carried Letterman and brought Colbert into America's bedrooms and occasionally nightmares will die a quiet death, sandwiched between a Medicare commercial and a Law and Order rerun. Why? Because it was bleeding cash like Hunter Biden at a laptop repair shop, $40 to $50 million in losses annually on a bloated $100 million budget. And that's not speculation. That's coming from CBS insiders who probably used a burning pile of Nielsen ratings as a space heater. But here's what has the conspiracy meter blinking red. This came right after Colbert flamed CBS for settling a massive $16 million lawsuit with Trump, accusing them of playing footsie with fascism. Days later, poof, canceled. Right as the Paramount Skydance merger hit the federal approval desk. So, was this strictly financial? Or was Colbert just the wrong court jester during merger season? Brian, it's time to flip the ledger and show us what's really in the red.
This wasn't just a red ledger, it was a bloodbath. Colbert's show wasn't just unprofitable, it was a catastrophic liability for CBS. They were leaking tens of millions annually while propping up a host who had become less late-night icon and more preachy sitcom dad with a teleprompter. I mean, think about this. Ad revenue for late night across all networks has dropped nearly 50% since 2018. And most of Colbert's demographic now watches TikTok political hot takes between vape hits. You can't sell ad space to people watching a 3-minute supercut of him making Trump jokes with a kazoo filter. But here's the thing. They didn't scale back. They didn't move him to streaming. They didn't slash the budget. They didn't renegotiate his $20 million salary. They canceled the whole damn institution. You do that when something isn't just failing, it's embarrassing. Not just to the accountants, but to the execs trying to merge a studio without looking like they're enabling an anti-Trump martyr with corporate airtime. So yeah, it was about the money, but don't forget, it was also about narrative control. They couldn't risk Colbert turning their merger honeymoon into a nightly divorce court.
Brian out here reading CBS's quarterly report like it's a war crime indictment? Rachel, when did Colbert go from being the king of satire to the ghost of clickbait past?
I think the rot set in the minute Colbert stopped parodying the system and started playing lapdog to it. He used to be clever. Colbert Report era him was dangerous, nimble, and full of satirical venom aimed in all directions. But once he took over the big desk and Trump became his personal Voldemort, everything just calcified. Every night it was a variation of Orange Man Bad, except with a laugh track and a choir of Brooklyn interns tweeting his jokes before the credits rolled. It stopped being funny and started sounding like therapy sessions for NPR listeners. People want humor, not homework. And here's the real punch in the gut. CBS didn't even try to evolve. They just said, hey, we'll eat the loss for another 10 months, then pull the cord. No spin-off, no new format, no attempt at revival. That tells me this wasn't just about numbers, it was about optics. Colbert torched the Trump settlement. He mocked the very execs who hold the purse strings, and he did it on air, right before a federal merger. That's not satire. That's sabotage, at least to the suits. So they neutered the risk and gave him a 10-month obituary with confetti.
Rachel just gave the autopsy and the eulogy. Daniel, we know you've got the red string out. Tell us how deep this thing goes.
Let's just say, I've got a corkboard full of receipts, and they all lead back to one thing: timing. Colbert didn't get cancelled because he was unfunny. That ship sailed years ago. He got canned because he said the quiet part out loud, that CBS caved to Trump's legal team right before a regulatory green light on an $8 billion merger. He called out his bosses in public, called the settlement a bribe, and essentially made himself an enemy of the state inside his own building. So what did they do? They hit the kill switch, not now, but in May, when the merger is done, the FCC is distracted, and Colbert is just another podcaster with a ring light. And let's talk damage control. The leaks started right after the backlash. Oh, we're losing $40 million a year, it's not personal. Sure, and Hunter Biden's laptop was just a misunderstood resume. CBS didn't fire him to save money. They burned the whole Late Show brand to avoid a prime-time revolt during a billion-dollar business deal. That's not cutting the fat. That's hiding the blood.
Daniel just turned this whole segment into a Netflix docuseries. And now, Bill from Brentwood, our AI guest with more snark than a press room at NPR, what's your take on the Colbert cliff dive?
Well, Stephen Colbert, the patron saint of progressive clapter, just found out that even smug sanctimony has a shelf life. Look, let's be honest, Colbert's show was losing money like a trust fund kid at Burning Man. He was costing CBS more than $100 million a year to produce, and reportedly pulling in ratings that barely beat a rerun of Everybody Loves Raymond. Ironic, since everybody stopped loving Colbert about 2 years into the Trump era. But what really did him in, it wasn't the money, it was the disobedience. He mocked the CBS-Trump settlement and basically dared the network to shut him up. And they did. You don't make $20 million a year and call your bosses sellouts without expecting consequences. And now he's out 10 months from now with no replacement in sight. That's not a transition, that's a slow-motion execution. So pour one out for late night, or don't, because nobody under 50 was watching anyway.
Bill just gave that man's career a Viking funeral and lit it with a flaming NBC memo. All right, Patriots, that's a wrap on segment 2. Colbert's out, comedy's limping, and the corporate overlords are back in the driver's seat. Next up, Tulsi Gabbard, the intelligence state, and a Russiagate rabbit hole that may finally end at Obama's front door. All right, so let's talk about the story that's making the suits at CNN sweat through their makeup and the deep state wished Tulsi Gabbard had just stayed in yoga class. This week, Tulsi pulled no punches, calling out what she calls the original sin of the Russiagate hoax. And guess who's in the crosshairs? Yeah, Barack scandal-free Obama. According to Tulsi, it all started under his watch. Intel community coordination, media manipulation, and the kind of political surveillance that would make Nixon say, "Damn, that's too much." Now the left's pretending this is ancient history. The right screaming vindication, and the intelligence community suddenly deaf, mute, and unavailable for comment. Let's go down this rabbit hole. Rachel's up first, and I can already feel the eye roll through the mic.
Look, I've never been one to jump on every conspiracy train that rolls through town. But at some point, when enough smoke fills the room, it's not incense. It's a 5-alarm fire. Tulsi Gabbard has credibility, backbone, and the kind of insider knowledge that makes the deep state more nervous than Joe Biden near a stairwell. And the fact that she's pointing back to Obama-era intelligence leadership, that's not wild-eyed guesswork. It's a plausible theory rooted in real questions. The FISA abuses, the planted stories, the Clinton campaign's fingerprints on the Steele dossier, it all smells like a coordinated hit job disguised as protecting democracy. What bugs me is that Democrats who once cheered Snowden are now clutching their pearls over Gabbard. We should all want to know the truth regardless of party, unless, of course, the truth is the one thing that could burn your narrative to the ground.
Rachel making more sense than a TSA agent with a functioning brain cell. Never thought I'd see the day. All right, Brian, put on your tinfoil trucker hat and let her rip.
Let me tell you what this is. Vindication, baby. Pure, unfiltered, grade A, red, white, and told you so. We spent years being called lunatics, traitors, Putin puppets, and worse, just for saying, hey, maybe the FBI shouldn't spy on a presidential campaign like they're auditioning for Homeland. Tulsi Gabbard's not some QAnon blogger in a bathrobe. She's a vet, a former congresswoman, and one of the only Democrats who didn't sell her soul to the DNC's groupthink. Her pointing to Obama? That's the shot heard round Langley. And let's be honest, the intelligence state didn't go rogue on its own. They had cover. They had coordination. And yeah, they had a media willing to play stenographer instead of journalist. This wasn't about national security. This was about neutralizing Trump before he even took office. And for all their democracy dies in darkness nonsense, turns out they were the ones turning off the lights.
Brian with the receipts and probably a half-smoked cigar in one hand while he says it. Now let's get our tinfoil tangled. Daniel, you've got the corkboard. What's on it?
Oh, buddy, it's not just a corkboard. It's a map of the underworld at this point. The Obama-era intelligence state didn't just overreach. They orchestrated a full-blown psychological op, complete with media manipulation, FBI informants, and a Steele dossier that reads like fan fiction from the worst corners of Reddit. You think it's coincidence that Fusion GPS, Perkins Coie, and every Beltway insider seem to be running the same playbook? Nah, this was a snake with 1,000 heads, and Tulsi just cut one off on live TV. And the real kicker? They're still doing it. Different president, same tricks. They just swapped out Russian asset for insurrectionist and hoped nobody noticed. We need more Tulsi Gabbards and fewer Adam Schiffs. And yes, I've got names, and yes, I'll share them. But only after I finish my bourbon and finish printing these declassified docs.
Daniel's got more strings than a harp at CIA headquarters. But let's bring in the smooth jazz of satire. Bill from Brentwood, save us from the serious before we all get put on a watch list.
You know, back in my day, accusing a former president of running a political spy ring used to be called newsworthy. Now it's called dangerous disinformation, unless it involves Trump. But Tulsi, she's the ex-Democrat who parties like a libertarian and roasts like a conservative. It's confusing, but I like it. If what she's saying is even half true, then we don't need a special counsel. We need a historical reckoning, maybe with popcorn and a narrator voiced by Morgan Freeman. But here's what gets me. The same people who spent 4 years screeching about Russian Facebook ads now have amnesia when it comes to actual intelligence abuse. So you don't get to wear a Save Democracy t-shirt and ignore the part where your side torched the manual. So yeah, Tulsi's saying the quiet part out loud, and the smart thing to do would be to listen. But knowing DC, they'll just schedule another TikTok hearing and call it progress.
And there it is. Bill with the perfectly stirred cocktail of wit, warning, and side-eye at the swamp. Coming up next, Brian's MAGA fire, Daniel's conspiracy board, and Rachel's red pill rant. Plus, one more merch drop that'll make your latte cry red, white, and blue. All right, before we slide into segment 3 like Pelosi into a backroom stock tip briefing, let's talk merch. Because if you're gonna watch the country burn, you might as well do it in a hoodie that speaks louder than your senator. We've got the trifecta of caffeinated rebellion: Bitterroot, High Lakes, and Rock Creek blends. Patriot-approved coffee that won't gaslight you before breakfast. And don't sleep on the Gen gear: shirts, mugs, trucker hats, and the world's most passive-aggressive bumper sticker: Data and Dissonance. Speak truth, stir thought. Perfect for that Prius in the Whole Foods parking lot that needs a wake-up call. Everything's at datadissonance.printify.me. Support the show, support my mom, and support your right to look good while telling the system to kick rocks. All right, time for Rachel's red pill rant. If you've been wondering why we still ring alarms after all this chaos, let her school you on the silent decay under the headlines.
There's a sickness in this country, and it isn't obvious. It's not the border. It's not the budget mess. It's the erosion of trust. We keep throwing out numbers: Medicare debts, corporate bailouts, BRICS expansion. while ignoring the fact that fewer people believe in institutions today than at any time in decades. We mock the media, but that's only because they abandon the truth for narratives. We decry politicians, but that's because every time someone says the quiet part out loud, they get buried. This week's spectacle around Hillary-linked documents, the Colbert fallout, and Tulsi's revelations, none of it's new. It's just more visible now, like a wounded fighter bleeding through a white shirt. We need accountability, not confessionals. We need transparency, not theater. Most of all, we need to rebuild trust. Not because it's easy, but because nothing else matters if nobody believes you anymore.
Now it's Brian's turn. Same segment, more fire. If you want a reminder why populism outranks PR briefs, stick with this.
Let's cut through the noise. This week proved one thing. Everything they told you was supposed to happen is falling apart. The elite still lectures about governance while they bail on projects. The legacy media still calls itself neutral while editing transcripts. And projects like BRICS now move faster than our generals can change rhetoric. The unspoken truth. Trump's second term isn't about nostalgia, it's about repentance. It's about finally facing the deep state, demanding loyalty, and refusing to let your institutions be hijacked by people who hate the people they serve. This isn't just a rant, it's a rallying cry. We're done watching bureaucrats and lobbyists run the show. We're not asking anymore. We're commanding. And if that sounds too aggressive, join the snow globe crowd and let us build something stronger.
Daniel jumps in next. Time for the conspiracies of the week, where the shadows aren't fiction. They're just reminders we're still playing in someone else's sandbox. Daniel, reveal.
Grab your string. This is the weave of the week. First thread. The Gabbard docs aren't just optics. They're a mirror reflecting the birthplace of Russiagate, a leak orchestrated by Intel tied to Clinton donors, using Pfizer courts as narrative tools. Second, the Colbert Canceled announcement came exactly 2 hours after the board approved the CBS Skydance merger. Not coincidence. That's influence laundering, not business prudence. Third, the Pentagon quietly approved a $200 million contract to develop language-based surveillance AI, just weeks before any talk of disinformation legislation. That means they're prepping for speech enforcement, not just speech analysis. This isn't conspiracy. This is the playbook. Open the dots, the light comes in. Once you do,
For tonight's Patriot Minute, we're honoring the Army Ranger Lead the Way Fund, a nonprofit providing financial and emotional support to wounded Rangers and Green Berets returning home after service. They deliver tailored medical grants, counseling, and family grants without asking for political credentials, just your dedication to protect. While politicians debate policy, these volunteers show up in Appalachia, Aleppo listing, or Arizona swamps. They prove that patriotism isn't a slogan. It's carrying someone else's burden when their uniform is already covered in it. To the Rangers who lead from the front, thank you for walking through the fire when it counted. This is for you. All right, folks, we've covered the week with flamethrowers and fact checks. Tulsi shook the deep state tree. Colbert's walking papers are signed in red ink, and the Medicare Cuts turned into a Rorschach test for what side of the Constitution you actually believe in. But before we shut this circus down for the weekend, let's go around the horn. Get some final truth bombs from our favorite gang of political misfits. Rachel, you're up. Do your damage.
You know, I keep waiting for the moment when all the noise calms down and we can actually fix something. But that moment never comes. Because chaos is the business model. We're not debating how to solve problems anymore. We're picking sides in a game show, hoping our team wins while the real issues rot from neglect. And this week, it all felt so clear. Whether it's entitlement programs, late-night propaganda, or intel operations gone rogue, the common thread is arrogance. A belief that the people are too dumb, too divided, or too distracted to care. But that's where they're wrong. We do care. And more of us are waking up every day, ditching the echo chambers and looking for something real. So yeah, I'll keep calling it out. Even if it makes me the least fun person at brunch.
Rachel's not coming to your mimosa mixer unless you've got a redacted memo and a copy of the Constitution. Brian, spark the fire, my dude.
I'll give you fire, but first let me pour a little gasoline on it. This whole week's been a masterclass in liberal hypocrisy. Colbert's cancellation? The left mourns like they lost a national treasure. Meanwhile, the guy made his career mocking half the country while cashing $20 million a year to do it. Don't cry for him. Cry for the working class Americans who get labeled bigots for wanting their taxes to go to Americans. As for Medicare, I'll say what no one on CNN will. We can't save the system if we keep pretending everyone belongs in it. Illegals, scammers, career grifters, cut them loose. You want compassion? Start with the Americans who paid into it their whole damn lives. We're not heartless, we're just done being suckers.
Brian came in hot like a VA claim that actually got approved. Daniel, wrap some barbed wire around the truth and throw it at us.
Gladly, because this week confirmed what I've been saying since Epstein didn't kill himself. The media isn't just biased, it's weaponized. Colbert wasn't cancelled because he was irrelevant. He was cancelled because the ROI finally tanked. The propaganda lost its punch. The left ran out of jokes and started doing sermons in disguise. Meanwhile, Tulsi drops receipts on the deep state, and half the country still goes, that sounds like a conspiracy. Of course it does, because it is. But just because it's a conspiracy doesn't mean it's not true. The surveillance machine's still running. The influence games are still rigged. And the people who built that machine? They're hoping you're too busy watching TikTok dances to notice. But I've got receipts, coffee, and a corkboard. Let's ride.
Daniel's the only guy who brings a blueprint of Area 51 to a podcast recording. Bill, you've been watching this freak show from Brentwood. What's your closer?
Yeah, so this week's been like watching a car crash in reverse. You already know how it ends, but somehow it still makes you flinch. Colbert, gone. The man made more faces than jokes and somehow still convinced liberals he was the second coming of Cronkite. Tulsi, she walked onto the stage with a flamethrower and said, "Let me tell you what Obama's been up to." And Medicare, that sacred cow's now on keto, shedding all that illegal bloat. But the real kicker? The people who built this mess are pretending to be shocked it smells like garbage. Here's my advice, America. Don't take advice from comedians, don't take comedy from politicians, and definitely don't take healthcare tips from TikTok influencers wearing lab coats from Party City. You want truth? Start where the jokes make you uncomfortable.
This week peeled back the veneer like a bad sunburn. What used to be called comedy is now campaign messaging with a laugh track. What used to be classified is now just inconvenient truth. And what used to be compassion is now a racket designed to launder your morality through government grants and primetime sound bites. But here's what they didn't expect. Us. They didn't expect a ragtag crew of red-pilled independents, conspiracy realists, and unapologetic patriots to sit at the table and start flipping it over. They didn't expect Tulsi to go rogue, or for Americans to start choosing facts over feelings, or for satire to become the last safe harbor of honesty. They didn't expect that somewhere between the media spin, the policy lies, and the canceled contracts, we'd still be standing here, calling it out, mocking it, exposing it, and laughing as we go. Because we're not done, not by a long shot. Remember to speak truth, stir thought. And we'll see you Monday at 5 p.m. sharp for another ride through the madness.